What if one gutsy woman could turn a TV giant into a total train wreck in mere minutes? That's what Karoline Leavitt pulled off on The View one wild morning. A clash so explosive it had viewers choking on their coffee and the internet lighting up like a 4th of July sky. Forget your average chit-chat. This was a bare-knuckle brawl nobody saw coming, with the daytime legend stomping off in a fury by the end. Hooked already? Let's dive into every jaw-dropping second. You won't want to miss a thing. Drop a comment below. Ever catch a talk show implosion this insane? The day started like any other on The View. The audience filed in, the lights flared up, and the panel settled into their usual spots. Whoopi Goldberg, the queen bee of the table, was ready to steer the ship as she'd done for years, keeping every discussion firmly in her grip, nudging the narrative where she wanted it to go. She'd faced plenty of guests before, dismantling their points with a sharp tongue and a louder voice. That morning, though, she met her match in Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative firebrand who wasn't about to play by Whoopi's rules. From the second Karoline walked out, you could feel the air crackle. This was no ordinary guest. The topic? Misinformation in politics and media bias. Juicy stuff, right? Whoopi kicked things off with her classic swagger, eyeing Karoline like a lion sizing up its next meal. So we've got Karoline Leavitt here, a voice for conservative values, she said, her tone already dripping with skepticism. And let's just say, we've got a lot to unpack today. The crowd chuckled, sensing the setup. Whoopi leaned in, her elbows on the table. Karoline, let's cut to the chase. Conservative media has been pumping out misinformation left and right. How do you even defend that? Boom. There it was, the trap laid out like a welcome mat, daring Karoline to step into it. But Karoline? She didn't stumble. She sat there, cool as ice, hands resting calmly on the table. Here's the real question. Whoopi, she fired back, her voice steady as a drumbeat. Who gets to slap the misinformation label on something? Because I've seen your networks get it wrong more times than I can count. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some shocked, some intrigued. Even the co-hosts squirmed a little, glancing at each other. Whoopi's smirk faded, her eyes narrowing. Oh, come on, she snapped, waving a hand. We fact-check everything here. We don't peddle nonsense. Karoline tilted her head, a glint in her eye. Really? No nonsense? Funny, I've got a few examples that say otherwise. And just like that, the vibe shifted hard. This wasn't Karoline scrambling to defend herself. This was her flipping the script, taking the wheel right out of Whoopi's hands. The audience felt it. The co-hosts felt it. And Whoopi. She was already bristling, her fingers tapping the table like a ticking clock. She wasn't used to losing her grip this fast, and you could tell it was eating at her. The stage was set for a battle nobody expected, and it was only getting started. The studio lights buzzed overhead as the tension cranked up a notch. Whoopi Goldberg wasn't about to let Karoline Leavitt steal her spotlight without a fight. She straightened in her chair, her voice slicing through the air like a knife. Oh, please, Karoline, she shot back, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Don't waltz in here pretending conservative media hasn't been caught red-handed pushing flat-out lies. We're here for facts, not fairy tales. A few claps echoed from the crowd, but you could sense the unease. Something was brewing, and it wasn't going to be pretty. Karoline, though, she didn't blink. She sat there, steady as a rock, letting Whoopi's jab hang in the air for a split second before brushing it off like dust. But Whoopi wasn't done. She smelled blood and went for the kill. And let's keep it real, she pressed, her eyes locked on Karoline. Folks like you are why this country's in a mess right now. You spin this sob story about being silenced, while your crew's out there shutting down anyone who dares to disagree. The crowd gasped, some shocked, some eating it up. Even the co-hosts shifted awkwardly, like they knew this was crossing a line. Whoopi kept rolling, her voice climbing higher. You act like conservatives are voiceless, but here you are, parked at my table with a megaphone. So tell me, Karoline, where's this big bad censorship you're whining about? The audience let out a nervous laugh, thinking Whoopi had landed a knockout punch. But Karoline? She didn't flinch. She just raised an eyebrow, letting the noise settle like ripples in a pond. Then, with the calm of someone who knows they've got the upper hand, she dropped 3 little words that stopped Whoopi cold. Are you finished? The room froze. Whoopi blinked, her mouth twitching like she'd just bitten into something sour. She wasn't ready for that, not even close. The crowd went dead quiet, every eye glued to the table. Karoline didn't rush, didn't raise her voice. She just leaned back slightly, her gaze locked on Whoopi, and let the silence do the heavy lifting. Then, with a cool, calculated edge, she fired back. You say conservatives aren't silenced, that we've got platforms like this. Okay, fair. But tell me, Whoopi, when's the last time a conservative sat here, not just today, but this week, this month, and actually got to speak their mind? The audience stirred, a low hum spreading through the seats. Whoopi waved it off, her hand flapping like she could swat the question away. Oh, come on. We've had conservatives here tons of times, she scoffed, but her voice sounded thinner now, less sure. Karoline nodded, slow and deliberate, like she was setting a trap. Sure, you've had them, she said, her tone smooth as silk. But what happens? Do you let them talk, or do you steamroll them, mock their ideas, and call them troublemakers while the crowd cheers you on? Whoopi tried to laugh it off, but it came out forced, hollow. The vibe in the room was shifting fast, and she was losing her footing. Karoline didn't let up. She leaned in just a touch, her voice still calm but cutting like a blade. You preach tolerance, Whoopi, but real tolerance means letting other views breathe, not just the ones you nod along to. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Some co-hosts fiddled with their notes, avoiding eye contact. Whoopi's fingers drummed the table, her jaw tight as a drum. She opened her mouth to snap back, but Karoline wasn't done. She was about to drop a line that would flip the whole game on its head, and nobody, not even Whoopi, saw it coming. The studio air felt thick, like a storm was about to break loose. Whoopi Goldberg's laugh, forced and shaky, still hung in the room, but Karoline Leavitt wasn't letting it slide. She just questioned Whoopi's so-called tolerance, and now the crowd was on edge, caught between stunned silence and nervous whispers. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a live TV tightrope walk, and one wrong step could send everything crashing down. Whoopi's eyes flashed, her fingers gripping the table like she was holding on for dear life. She wasn't about to let this cool-headed conservative upstage her, not on her turf. Karoline sat there, unshaken, her voice steady as steel. Then she dropped the bomb that made the room gasp. Maybe that's why fewer people take the show seriously anymore. Boom. The air sucked out of the studio like a vacuum. The audience let out a collective ooh, some clapping, others clutching their pearls. The co-hosts froze, exchanging wide-eyed looks like deer in headlights. Whoopi's face. It went stiff, her lips pressing into a thin, angry line. She'd been hit where it hurt most, her show, her legacy, and Karoline had landed the punch without even raising her voice. For a split second, you could see Whoopi's brain scrambling. She let out a brittle chuckle, shaking her head like Karoline's words were too ridiculous to touch her. Oh, sweetheart, she said, her voice oozing sarcasm, thick as honey laced with venom. You're sitting right here, aren't you? So obviously we're giving other voices a shot. You conservatives just can't stand it when someone calls you out for being wrong. The crowd murmured, unsure who to root for, some still loyal to Whoopi, others starting to waver. But Karoline? She didn't budge. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just enough to show she wasn't buying the dodge. Called out. Karoline shot back, her tone calm but loaded with fire. No, Whoopi, what conservatives can't stand is being drowned out, talked over, and slapped with a dangerous label just for thinking differently. Whoopi rolled her eyes so hard you could almost hear it, but Karoline kept going, relentless. You sit here day after day preaching free speech, acting like you're all about open talk. But the second someone pushes back, really pushes, you don't argue. You attack. You mock. You try to bury them. And when that fails, you shut it down. The crowd was dead quiet now, every word sinking in like a stone. Whoopi shifted in her seat, arms crossed tight, her cool slipping away like sand through her fingers. Oh, give me a break, she snapped, her voice cracking with irritation. Nobody's shutting you up, Karoline, you're still talking. But Karoline wasn't fazed. She leaned forward, just a touch, her gaze piercing through Whoopi's bravado. Really? Then tell me this. When's the last time you let a conservative sit here, speak their piece, and walk away without you cutting them off or trashing them? The question landed like a thunderclap. Whoopi opened her mouth, then shut it, her face twisting as she fished for an answer, and came up empty. The silence stretched, heavy and brutal. The camera zoomed in, catching every flicker of Whoopi's unease, her jaw clenching, her eyes darting. The crowd didn't dare breathe. Karoline let it hang there, a smirk tugging at her lips, before she delivered the knockout. Maybe people are tuning out not because of misinformation, but because you don't give them real talk. You give them a performance. Outrage dressed up as truth. The audience erupted, gasps, scattered applause, a wave of shock crashing through the room. Whoopi's mask slipped, her hands trembling slightly on the table. She'd lost the reins, and everyone knew it. The co-host squirmed, one fumbling with her coffee mug like it might save her from the chaos. This wasn't just a segment gone wild. It was Whoopi's empire cracking on live TV, and the fallout was about to get messy. The studio was a powder keg, and Karoline Leavitt had just lit the fuse. Her words, outrage dressed up as truth, still echoed, leaving the audience reeling and Whoopi Goldberg teetering on the edge. The applause faded into a tense hush, every eye locked on Whoopi's next move. She sat there, stiff as a board, her usual swagger crumbling like a house of cards. This wasn't her show anymore. Karoline had snatched the crown, and Whoopi's face screamed she knew it. Her empire wasn't just cracking, it was shaking at the foundations, and the clock was ticking on her comeback. She forced a breath, her voice tight as a wire. "Oh, I'm done with this nonsense," she muttered, flicking her hand like she could wave the whole mess away. The crowd gasped, sensing the storm brewing. Karoline tilted her head, cool as ever, and asked, "You're done?" It wasn't loud, wasn't snarky, just pure, quiet defiance that cut deeper than any shout. Whoopi's eyes flared, her patience snapping like a twig. "Yeah, I'm done," she barked, yanking her mic off and tossing it onto the table with a clatter. "I don't sit here to waste time on people spewing garbage." The room exploded, gasps, murmurs, a few stray claps. The co-host sat frozen, one clutching her pen like a lifeline, another staring wide-eyed at the chaos. Karoline didn't twitch, she just folded her hands, watching Whoopi shove her chair back with a screech. "This show's about real talk," Whoopi snapped as she stood, her voice shaking with fury, "not handing a stage to this trash." Then she stormed off, her footsteps pounding like thunder, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The cameras jerked, unsure where to point, stay on Karoline's calm smirk or chase Whoopi's dramatic exit. Behind the scenes, producers were losing it, headsets buzzing, hands waving, a frantic scramble to decide, cut to commercial or let this train wreck roll. The audience didn't know what to do, some shifted in their seats, others whispered, a few clapped for Karoline's steel nerves. One co-host finally broke the quiet with a shaky laugh. "Well, that just happened, huh?" she said, her voice thin as paper. The camera lingered on Karoline, who adjusted her mic, glanced at Whoopi's empty chair, and let a tiny, knowing smile slip out. That smirk? It was dynamite proof she'd won without firing a shot. And just like that, the internet caught fire. Before the show even hit a break, phones were out, thumbs flying, clips of Whoopi's meltdown racing across Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. The raw, unfiltered moment was everywhere, racking up views faster than a viral cat video. Hashtags popped off like fireworks. Hashtag Whoopi walks. Hashtag Karoline owns the view. Hashtag talk show takedown. People who'd never tuned into The View were glued to their screens, replaying Karoline's cool takedown and Whoopi's fiery retreat. The crowd in the studio might have been split, but online? It was a landslide. Karoline had flipped the script, and Whoopi's exit was the cherry on top. The buzz didn't stop there. Within minutes, reactions flooded in: savage, hilarious, and straight-up brutal. Whoopi just proved Karoline right. She can't handle a real fight. One tweet blazed. Thought she was the queen, but she ran the second it got tough. Pathetic. Another piled on. Even the View's diehards were shook. Been watching for years, but this? Embarrassing. If Whoopi had a solid comeback, she'd have stayed, a fan posted. The moment wasn't just big, it was seismic, a crack in the View's armor that no one could unsee. And the wildest part? The chaos was only heating up. The internet was a wildfire, and Whoopi Goldberg's dramatic exit from The View was the spark that kept it roaring. By the time the show's stunned producers cut to commercial, that clip, Karoline Leavitt's cool smackdown and Whoopi's mic-tossing tantrum, was already a runaway train online. Millions watched, jaws dropped, as the moment looped on every platform known to man. Twitter was a war zone of hot takes, TikTok turned Whoopi's storm off into comedy gold, and YouTube comments lit up with savage roasts. This wasn't just a talk show flub, it was a cultural earthquake, and the aftershocks were shaking The View to its core. Conservative outlets pounced like lions on fresh meat. Fox News looped the clip all night, their headline screaming, "Whoopi crumbles as Karoline Leavitt exposes her hypocrisy." The Daily Wire chimed in, "Watch Whoopi run when facts hit too hard, total meltdown." Newsmax even dragged in a body language guru, who dissected Whoopi's every twitch. That wasn't just anger, the expert said, smirking. That was panic. She knew she'd lost and bolted. The clip played on repeat, pundits slicing it up like a Thanksgiving turkey, every second fueling the narrative. Whoopi couldn't hack it, and Karoline had her number. Mainstream media tried to throw water on the blaze, but it was like spitting on a bonfire. CNN brushed it off as a fiery exchange blown out of proportion, while MSNBC spun it as Whoopi standing firm against nonsense. The Washington Post tossed out an op-ed claiming Karoline baited her for drama, not debate. But the excuses flopped hard. The footage was raw, unfiltered, and right there for all to see. No spin could hide Whoopi ripping off her mic and bolting while Karoline sat there, unshaken. People didn't need pundits to tell them what they'd witnessed. They had the receipts, and they weren't buying the cleanup crew story. Then the memes hit, and oh boy, did they hit hard. Whoopi's stunned glare became a viral sensation when you start a fight but realize you're out of ammo. Another gem. Whoopi walking off like, nope, not today, with her exit synced to cartoon sound effects. Karoline's chill vibe got its own tribute. When you bring facts to a feelings party and watch the host implode. Even celebs jumped in, a former View co-host tweeted. Finally, someone stood up to Whoopi and didn't blink. About damn time. Jimmy Fallon couldn't resist, replaying the clip on his show with a grin. I haven't seen an exit that fast since my dog heard the vet's car pull up. But the real mic drop? That came from Karoline herself. She didn't need a victory lap or a big speech. She just retweeted the viral clip with a razor-sharp caption. I thought this was supposed to be a debate. Bam, millions of likes, shares flying like confetti, news desks quoting it live. It was short, sweet, and brutal, letting Whoopi's meltdown speak for itself. Meanwhile, the View's team was in full panic mode. ABC execs were fuming behind closed doors, whispers leaking that they were disappointed in Whoopi's blow-up. Sponsors twitched, ratings wobbled, and the show's PR machine churned out a lame statement. Things got heated, but we're all about real talk and respect. Yeah, right. Nobody was swallowing that. Here's the kicker. Drop a comment below. Well, what would you have done if you were Karoline, facing Whoopi's meltdown? Stick around, because this mess wasn't over. The fallout was piling up, and Whoopi's next move, or lack of one, was about to make or break her. The internet wasn't letting this die, and neither were the viewers who'd just seen the View's mask slip right off. The dust hadn't even settled, but the View was already scrambling to patch up the wreckage. Whoopi Goldberg's walkout had turned a routine episode into a full-blown disaster, and the producers knew it. By the next morning, they rolled out a polished statement, classic damage control. Yesterday got spicy, but we love a good debate. We're all about respect and real talk moving forward. It was smooth, sure, but it landed like a wet rag. The internet wasn't here for PR fluff. Millions had seen Whoopi bolt, and no fancy words could rewind that tape. For a full day, Whoopi stayed quiet, a rare move for someone who usually clapped back fast. Rumors swirled. Some said ABC brass had her on lockdown. Others figured she was waiting out the storm. When she finally spoke on the next show, her fire was dialed down, her tone clipped. I walked off because I don't play with bad faith nonsense, she said, staring straight ahead. Some folks come to stir the pot, not talk. The crowd clapped, but it felt half-hearted, like even they weren't fully sold. She'd left the stage, not Karoline, and that truth stuck like gum on a shoe. Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, didn't need to say much. Her work was done. In a later interview, she kept it simple. I went on for a real conversation, not a circus. But if they can't handle a challenge without running, that says it all. Her calm, no drama vibe only made Whoopi's exit look louder and weaker. The clip kept racking up views, hitting 25 million in days, cementing its spot as a talk show legend. Ratings for The View dipped, sponsors squirmed, and Whoopi's rep took a hit she couldn't dodge. The real sting? The narrative flipped. For years, The View painted conservatives as the ones ducking tough talks. Now, the world had seen Whoopi flee while Karoline stood firm. Memes and hot takes kept the moment alive. Whoopi ran. But the internet never forgets. She could dodge it on air, but online, it was eternal. If she truly believed in debate, why'd she bounce? That question lingered, unanswered, as the fallout carved a permanent mark. What do you think? Could Whoopi have saved face, or was this her checkmate? Drop your take below.